to another episode of Good Morning America, and welcome to Ed News. Today we have different specials with our gorgeous reporters about dialects and different ways to represent ethnicities.
For starters, at every episode we like to remind you the difference between dialects and languages.
A dialect is a regional or social variety of a language distinguished by pronunciation, grammar, and/or vocabulary.
So all dialects come from language, but sadly not all languages.
Truly sad, in fact, since a language is a dialect with an army and navy.
Dialects have shown to give greater sense of community to people, since it isn't common for people to have dialect classes, or for them to learn them appropriately without actually living in the place, and by consequence would only learn them from a native dialect speaker or by the community itself.
There is a variety of countries in which people feel incredibly proud of speaking their dialects. Countries with so many dialects that from north to south, they don't reach to understand 100% of the region's dialect.
On the other side, there are a lot of dialects being lost day by day, losing not only a unique form of communication, but a whole other perspective of the world. Coming right next, the
Breaking news coming back to our headline news.
It's Friday, September 22nd, and we hope you're all having a great morning. We have stories and conversation for you in the next 30 minutes. Let us keep you company. We get started with this morning headlines.
So yesterday, at the university in the UK, language experts gathered to discuss if it is worth saving the world's endangered languages. Samuel Johnson stated that the language is the dress of thoughts. The Endangered Languages Foundation estimates that around 25 mother languages are lost every year.
But where did this take place? This week conference in West Wales was organized by a foundation that wants to discuss about indigenous languages in Ireland, China, Australia, and Spain. Students are fighting for the preservation of their mother languages in the United Kingdom because when languages are lost, most of the knowledge that went with it get lost forever.
On the other hand, the writer and broadcaster Kenan Malik said it's rational to preserve all the world's languages. He argued on an interview that while it may seem sad that languages extinct, it's a cultural change that it is driving the process. He claimed, if people want to learn minority languages, it is up to them, but the government shouldn't back up this organization.
The third International Conference on Language Documentation and Conservation is taking place on the campus of the University of Hawaii. This year's theme is Sharing Worlds of Knowledge, since it highlights the interdisciplinary nature of language documentation that contains many aspects of human knowledge that language encodes.
Welcome you back to First Alert Weather, with our special coverage of the natural phenomena that are taking place right now all over the world. I'm getting news. Regina, is that you?
Reporting live from India, where the wind is rising at a speed of 130 miles per hour. Thanks to the high winds and the lack of education, India has now 197 endangered languages that there have been pieces of the culture coming off the country. Children have been the first victims of the storms since they now only speak English, forgetting about their ethnic dialects. The wind is going to get stronger on the next several days if the government decides not to introduce conservation programs and to preserve languages.
This radar has detected that the worst of the airstream is now moving towards North America, where the United States has now 191 languages that are in danger of disappearing, and certainly becoming a rising death to all ethnic groups. The breezy conditions are getting worse, and more ethnic languages are in danger of getting extinct. In Mexico, a major earthquake of 7.1 caused panic and pandemonium in all the streets. A reporter stated that there is a record of 143 endangered languages because the earthquake hit a heavily ethnic populated area where the Spanish language is predominating since it has more power than pop.
Thank you, Marijuan Regina. Those are some very interesting news. And now for the national news, the sports section. Welcome, my beautiful people, to another day in the athletic world.
Every day we have different results for our games and new and improved statistics. Have you already downloaded the app for your fantasy team?
And if not, download it through the App Store as Fantasy's Dialect.
However, let us start with La Liga, with our top 10 spoken languages, spoken dialects in Spanish.
As usual, one of the strongest and most loved Spanish dialect, Latin American Spanish, of course. This is the dialect of urban mainland Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and the majority of Central and South American countries. While there are differences in how Spanish is spoken amongst people in these countries, Latin America Spanish is usually referred as thus is in order to differentiate between it and the Spanish spoken in Spain. Of course, as we are used to, this great team is one of our favorites for the final of La Liga.
On the other side, we have Caribbean Spanish as one of the most spoken Spanish dialects. This dialect is spoken in Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and along the east coast of Mexico and Central America. It is characterized by the exclusion of the middle consonants and omitted final consonants, as well as the aspirated R that is pronounced like the Portuguese X.
Rioplatense Spanish is another strong candidate for this cup. This dialect is spoken in the river basin region between Argentina and Uruguay, as well in both countries. The biggest difference between Rioplatense and other Spanish dialects is the intonation of its speakers, which resembles Italian technique more than Spanish, making it a unique team in La Liga.
However, from the old country we have the Andalusian dialect, spoken in southern Spain, winner of La Liga since 2009. However, it differs greatly from northern Spanish in the ceseo and ceseo distinction, the emission of the consonants D and R, the aspiration of the consonants S at the end of the words, and the dropping of final consonants. These factors result in a softer and more fluid sound than other of the Spanish languages dialects.
So, I think that the winner of La Liga would be Spanish. And Marijo, what do you think?
I agree with you. I think that the Andalusian dialect would be also a really good option. However, the Caribbean Spanish is always rising. We'll see.
We'll have to find out.
We interviewed our former geography teacher, and she told us a really interesting facts about dialects and languages. We didn't know a lot of the things she told us, but here we go.
So we're here with Camille Cassis. Hello, Camille.
Hi.
Can you tell us, first of all, what did you study in university?
Oh, my undergrad is, I have a double major in anthropology and Spanish, and I have a master's degree in Spanish language acquisition, K through 12, and I'm currently working on a second master's in educational leadership.
Good candidate for this interview. So, Camille, can you tell us, please, what do you think about dying languages?
Before I tell you what I think about languages that are spoken by less people than before, I have an issue with the phrase dying languages. I think that the word dying implies that a language is on its way out and there's nothing we can do, or a language is already becoming extinct and there's nothing we can do. When we think about languages, what we really should be thinking about is ethnicities. We need to think about the speakers of a language. So when we're thinking about languages that are spoken by less and less people, what we really need to be talking about is how are we addressing the fact that there are less speakers of a specific language.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
So living in Mexico, there's like a lot of people who are speaking less of their dialects. What do you think of these issues, specifically talking about Mexico?
Because I have a background in linguistics, I want to go ahead and correct the idea that speakers in Mexico are speakers of dialects. A dialect is a part of a language that has different vocabulary. What you're actually referring to are speakers of actual different languages, so let's call them languages and not dialects, even though in Spanish we erroneously use the word dialecta. I think that that word is used as a way to subjugate or to push people down who aren't speaking Spanish as their first language. But getting back to your original question about people who speak languages other than Spanish in Mexico, there are many, many, many ethnic groups in Mexico that still have kept their language alive at home. In addition, a lot of schools around Mexico that are funded by the government, so SEP-approved schools, are bilingual schools. So we have like a dual language school of Spanish and Nahuatl, or a dual language school of Spanish and Cora, for example. I think that around the world, Mexico is actually a good example on how to make sure that languages, speakers of languages, end up surviving.
Okay. Okay. So do you think that it is basically like the roots are in home, our families? Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, or fortunately, or however you want to look at it, some languages, as you know from my class in geography many years ago, some languages and some aspects of culture become, have a bigger status or a higher status than others, right? So when we talk about Mexico, when we talk about Spanish, we're talking about the hegemonic culture is of the Spanish speakers. However, a numerical majority are also speaking other languages at home. What we've got to figure out is how to make sure that speaking and learning how to read and write in the language at home, how that transfers to making it academic as well, so that those kids grow up as speakers of the language as well.
Okay. And what do you think are some benefits about a society, about a nation, which has a lot of different languages?
Oh, wow. Well, as you know, you speak 2 languages or maybe more, but the moment you start thinking in another language, you see the world in a different way. You can add perspectives to your brain that you hadn't considered before. I'll give you an example. It's kind of a classic example, and it's somewhat of a legend because it's not entirely accurate. However, the Inuit cultures in the North Pole, a lot of languages of those cultures have multiple words for the word snow. Because there's this type of snow and that type of snow and that type of snow. Obviously for you and me, snow is snow because it never happens, yes. Right? But when you have aspects of language or vocabulary that applies to specific areas of the world or specific cultural activities, the language in and of itself enriches how you look at your surroundings.
Okay. That's a really interesting perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is all. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
It was
In order to get a greater comprehension of what is dying languages, we founded a poem about how the Maori tradition is becoming a dying language, and it makes us understand how people feel about losing their language and losing part of their culture due to the regional languages.
Up next, we have a poem by M. Mahauraki from 2012 about dying languages. The traditional Maori language is a dying language. You can see these over the decades. Laws passed by the governments forced it to be this way. My ancestors were beaten up in schools for what deemed to be a forked tongue, constantly shamed and ridiculed in front of everyone. Being a proud race, emotions weren't meant to be shared. So they stopped speaking the language for the white man they feared. The next generation struggled, caught in violent time. Their parents reluctant to teach them because fear was always there on their mind. With each generation following the same trend, the language became harder to learn. Only remnants remain now of a proud race that just got burned. The language most spoken now comes from the cities. It has been transformed. European Maori widely is accepted. Very rarely can the old language be learned.
Let me tell you more about the dying languages and what does it mean to be a dying language. First of all, culture and history are reflected in many ways. Clothing, food, even architecture are just common ways to differentiate one culture from another. But was one of the most potential ways of understanding the culture and history of a country or region is through language. Many cultures, unfortunately, are losing languages as there's a huge list of endangered languages that is growing day by day. But to begin with, why does languages die? Languages die for many reasons. Some are cultural. For example, many cultures have been colonized or otherwise dominated by another culture. For example, Mexico is a very good example. We were colonized by Spanish people, so in that way, we were influenced by them through the language in a way that we now speak Spanish instead of using the indigenous languages that were before the Spanish came. Often, this translated into suppressing the native culture as it did to the indigenous cultures in Mexico, and the conditions lasted long enough, then these languages dwindle. So that means that they were separated from or they died out altogether. There are many consequences for endangered languages. For example, the loss of one foreign language has consequences much wider than simply losing a vocabulary. Even archived, a dead language may be missing tone, accent, grammar, syntax, and context. These verbal traits are often used to reflect the speaker's way of thinking as much as the actual choice of words. Losing a language also can mean losing crucial knowledge. As we stated before, language comes with history. So, about the linguistic group's history, culture, or even knowledge about their local environment can be lost with language. For example, being able to choose different words for plants, or even the earth they grow in, also approves scientists, botanics, and academics with information that might be lost otherwise if these specific descriptions did not have an equivalent word in a dominant language. And how can we preserve these endangered languages? Many linguistics and academics who recognize the value of dying languages are working to preserve them through the use of modern technology. These can include recordings, which can facilitate some of the language context. This can even include the use of appeal to younger members of a culture so they can become interested in continuing the use of it. In addition to the accelerated use of technology, many dying languages are being reintroduced or re-emphasized by linguistics so they can make the children recognize those languages and get the ability to learn them as a new language and make it easier for it to be extinct.
So, here is our proposal. Go to the closest community which speaks dialects and try to learn something. Try to learn something because you never know the perspectives you can gain. You never know the benefits that can help the country because it's part of a nationalism perspective and ideology. Go and tag us with the hashtag #DyingLanguages.
Email. We just received a letter. So, let's see. Who is it from? Team Brooks. Hello. It says, Dear friends and colleagues, my Endangered Alphabets project is in the process of giving birth to a new phrase, the Endangered Alphabets Poetry Project. Let me explain what I'm trying to do. I've written a short, simple poem about the importance of preserving endangered languages in their spoken and written forms. And it goes like this. These are our words, shaped by our hands, our tools, our history. Lose them, and we lose ourselves. I would like to get this poem translated, with your help, into as many endangered languages in their original scripts as possible. I'm hoping that you may be able to translate the poem into any of the world's minority or endangered writing systems, or, failing that, pass the poem on someone who can. I don't have an urgent deadline. If I could get the first translations within a few weeks, I can start working. And if it takes 2 or 3 months for them to trickle in, that's perfectly fine. Once I have the translations, I'd like to create 2 pieces of work with them 2 different versions of the project. For one of these versions, I'll pass the text along to Bob Holman, who has won a substantial grant to have poems projected onto sides of large buildings in New York. He's very interested in projecting poems in endangered languages and endangered alphabets. The other version will be another major carving project. I plan to build a sculpture that consists of 4 tall pieces of a beautiful maple wood, each facing a different point of the compass. Each phase of the sculpture will display the poem in 2, 3, or 4 endangered alphabets, depending how many I'm able to collect. This sculpture will go to a permanent exhibition in a major public building in the US. I hope very much you're interested in the poem as I am. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. For more information, go to the Endangered Alphabets. Please visit www.endangeredalphabets.com. With very best wishes, Tim Brooks, Director, Professional Writing Program, Champlain College, Burlington, Vermont. Thank you, Tim, very much. This is a really nice project, and if you guys know any endangered languages or you know any minority writing system, then you can send us your email or you can send it directly to Tim. Thank you very much, and we love having these we love having these impact on you guys.
Dr. Christine Schreier, an associate professor teaching anthropology and linguistics, went to Krypton, at least as close as any of us will get. In 2011, Warner Brothers approached Schreier to develop the Kryptonian language for Man Steel. Schreier began her journey quite young. She has wanted to be an anthropologist since she was 12. She also always been interested in indigenous people and completely a directed study to the Creole language during her undergraduate studies at the University of Winnipeg. In graduate school, she compared the oral stories of the Chapelou Cree First Nation to records from the Hudson Bay Company and worked with the Loon River Cree. She currently does field work in Papua New Guinea documenting Kala. What does this have to do with Krypton, you may ask? Schreier's background in reviving and protecting endangered languages made her the perfect candidate to create an imaginary language, with one big difference. Her research studied in the interaction between language and land, yet the fictional world of Krypton cannot be visited. Kryptonian is a little like Japanese with both an older system of symbols or glyphs. If Schreier's career is an example, you never know where your childhood dreams and undergraduate studies could take you. So sign up for that directed seminar and pursue what interests you, because you never know, it may even take you an imaginary world.
Hi everyone, I have come all the way to the village of Ayapa, which is located in the southern part of Tabasco, and I have found that there is an indigenous language here which is at the risk of being extinct. I have come up with two women that speak it fluently. Actually, they're the two only women left who talks this language. I'm here with Manuela Segovia and Isidra Velázquez, and due to some issues in the past, they had a fight with each other, but now I was able to get them together so we can talk about how they feel about their dying language and get some opinions on what they feel. So hi, thank you very much for this warm welcome. I have felt so pleased in your hometown and for taking the time to talk with us. So let us know something about you. Let's start with you, Manuela.
Hi, my name is Manuela Segovia. I'm 18 years old. I have lived in Tabasco my entire life, and I have learned to speak Ayapenaco since I was little due to my grandparents.
My name is Isidra Velázquez. I am 5 years older than Manuela. I am 75 years old. I also lived my whole life here in Tabasco. Actually, we live only 500 meters away from each other. I learned Ayapaneco from my grandparents, and we used to speak it at my house.
So I heard you got into a fight recently which kept you from talking to each other. Is that right?
Yes, it is true. We actually got into a fight about the language itself that kept us from talking for a long time.
I came to realize that our fight made me stop talking to the only person I could actually talk to.
So the town has gotten together to build a school where kids can learn the language. How do you feel about it? I think it's amazing that there's a way we can keep this language to be extinct. And what are your thoughts on passing on your language and knowledge to relatives?
I am very impressed. I feel really, really grateful for the people in my town that make us feel very happy to live here and maintain our language alive, hoping that we can actually pass on the language to other people.
I don't have words to describe the joy I feel towards all the people that has helped us through the process. I am also very happy to see that the kids are really interested in going to the school to learn Ayapaneco.
So thank you very much for taking your time off and being able to answer all of our questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It was our pleasure.
And I think it's really important to keep kids focused and keep the language from dying. The younger generations should be the most aware of these dying languages in order to make a change and keep them alive. Tabasco has proposed the perfect example in order to keep this language, Ayapaneco, from dying. Keeping the kids aware of their tradition and where they come from is very important so they can become motivated and keep their roots alive. Thank you. That was our special interview on dying languages, and after the break, we are coming back with more information.
Thank you
Very much!
for watching our show.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And I hope I see you next time watching our show.
Ethnic News!